There are plenty of YouTube videos covering the geopolitics of modern nation states, but there isn't much attention paid to the geopolitics of past empires. Most videos cover the history and characters, but not so much the land and seascapes that shaped these events. In this video, we're going to be going over the geopolitics of the Incan Empire. I went on the Incan Trail a few years ago in Peru, so this subject matter has a special place in my heart. The Inca and the greater Andean civilizations are one of the most amazing outliers in human history due to their isolation, a form of complex societies vastly different than most other complex societies. In spite of their isolation, they produced a remarkably sophisticated civilization, albeit one without writing and currency. First off, they were located in South America, the last major non-island landmass to be inhabited by humans, as a relatively small number of hunter-gatherers crossed the land bridge along what is now the Bering Strait between Siberia and Alaska, and over several generations arrived in what is now Peru, along with the surrounding countries like Ecuador and Bolivia. The oldest complex society in South America was not in the Andes Mountains, but rather north of Chico, off the Peruvian desert coast. Eventually, complex civilizations would spread more inland into the highlands of the Andes. Now, the Andes are remarkable. You can see snowfall here all year round, even though it's on the equator of what is now Ecuador. In Ecuador, west of the Andes, is a tropical coast. To the south in Peru, the coast is by and large composed of desert. Same with Bolivia. But to the east of the Andes Mountains is the massive Amazon basin, home to the largest tropical rainforest in the world, and the largest river system by volume. The contrast of landscapes is the strongest here of any place in the world, and the people who could wrest control over this area had to master everything Mother Nature threw at them, from arid sand dunes to snow-capped peaks to lush jungles. It was in this general region where tomatoes were probably domesticated, along with quinoa, and most importantly, the potato, of which there are hundreds of varieties of this region. The hardy potato could be grown in cold and warm climates, areas that were rich in highly nutritious soil and poor soil, is easy to cultivate, and is highly caloric, along with the fact that it could also be produced with corn, a crop that was most likely cultivated first in Mesoamerica and through trade routes found its way to the Andes. Corn and potatoes would eventually fuel the bodies of the humans and animals that would build this civilization, and eventually transform the world. Speaking of animals, this region, and the Americas in general, are rather lacking in animals that can be domesticated. There are no cattle, chickens, pigs, sheep, goats, etc. in the Americas. Turkeys were found in Mesoamerica, but South America was limited to guinea pigs, which were used for food rather than the modern Western use of guinea pigs, which is to be soft and fluffy. And there were also llamas and alpacas, which played a very important role in not only providing meat, but also wool, which was necessary for the unpredictable alpine climate. Llamas were also used as pack animals, similar to donkeys and mules, but they were not as strong as horses and oxen. This meant that adults could not ride them, and as a result, all movement by humans was done by human feet. This was the part of the world that didn't produce the wheel either. The only use of wheels in the Americas was found in toys in Mesoamerica. The wheel wouldn't have mattered that much anyway given the intense variation of elevation, as wheels are more suitable for flat terrain. Nonetheless, the people of this region had to innovate in other ways, namely to produce a complex road system. Even if this was all done on foot, having roads made with commonly found stone in the region would allow many travelers to cross vast distances. At certain points, you would see runners who would send messages from one station to another, as the civilization lacked a writing system. They were able to practice mathematics with a weird rope system, but we still haven't figured out how this works to this day. The Incans also utilized the stones with expert craftsmanship and masonry. They didn't even use mortar. The slabs of stone are so finely crafted from excellent stone quarries that nature provided that they didn't even need proto-cement. Even the angles in which the buildings are built upon are built to withstand earthquakes. Through mastering infrastructure in buildings and roads, the Incans would wrest control over vast numbers of biomes and people. The empire essentially acted as a proto-communist state with a controlled economy, arguably the only large-scale successfully controlled economy in the world. While 20th century Marxists wanted to see a currency-less society, the Incans managed to do so without even knowing what currency was. In the empire, the unit of value was labor, and like 20th century communist societies, this oftentimes resulted in a system of forced labor, with many sectors being mining, quarries, farms, fishing, craftsmanship, and to a lesser extent the religious, administrative, and artistic purposes. There was also a large military to provide the force needed to control the empire and expand. The Incans didn't have the technology to forge iron, but they did manage to use copper and even bronze, which they used alongside stone. However, this system would not survive contact with the outside world. By the time the Spanish had arrived, contact with the outside world diseases such as smallpox, which originates from cattle from the Afro-Eurasian continent, if you could call it that, swept through the empire, killing Incans long before they ever made contact with Spanish swords. The Spaniards had the Latin alphabet, and many Incans were perplexed that these light-skinned men looked at paper with scribbles for so long, not realizing that the information they were processing would allow them to gain an upper hand. The Spaniards also had steel and gunpowder. Steel combines iron and carbon, which people in the Americas didn't have, and they didn't use the niter used to produce gunpowder and thereby rifles. The Spaniards also rode horses. Now, horses originate from the Americas, that's where their evolutionary origin is from, but those horses in the Americas eventually went extinct. But many of the proto-horses that migrated into Eurasia would eventually dominate the landscape of the steppe, and as a result were domesticated by many steppe cultures and eventually by Europeans, including the Spaniards. The Spaniards, as a result of this, had cavalry, and when their cavalry charged, the Incans ran away and got mowed down. Now, in the Old World, this just wouldn't have happened. Any Old World army would know that the way to deal with cavalry was for infantry to stand their ground and hold their pikes, swords, and whatever other spiky objects to cut down the horsemen. But living in the New World where they had no experience with cavalry, they just ran away and as a result got killed in mass. The Spaniards easily defeated the Incan Empire, converting many to Christianity, and taught the survivors how to speak Spanish, along with reading and writing, albeit with a great deal of violence. The Incan Empire had vast quantities of gold and silver, which they thought were the tears of the sun and the moon, as they didn't have a currency to turn them into money. The mountain of Potosi would be the most important mining spot during the Spanish Empire. This would be used for currency. Now, while the Spaniards, unlike the Incans, understood currency, they did not understand hyperinflation, and the massive abundance of Andean gold and silver caused the value of gold and silver to crash. This turned the Spanish Empire from one of immense wealth into one of poverty, only to be taken over by various Protestant empires such as the Dutch and the English. The Spaniards also didn't really like the excess elevation sickness and preferred to settle on the coast with a seaport to connect to Europe, setting up cities like Lima, the modern capital of Peru. Even La Paz, the quasi-capital of Bolivia, has a predominantly mestizo mixed population at the lower elevation, while many of the indigenous people prefer to live in El Alto, which is to the north and home to the city's airport. If there are any other long-gone empires that you're interested in learning the geopolitics of, inform me in the comments section, and perhaps I'll make a video about it. Thanks for watching.